It was very tough to find common ground as a group. However, we found it in childhood stories. We realized that we've all been in very similar situations growing up, whether they've been embarrassing, funny, or sad. We all have stories that haunt us at Thanksgiving and other family holidays, as well as stories we like to turn to when we're feeling down and need a pick-me-up. And we have found whether your story's about Taekwondo, whether it's about hockey, or even if it's about cows, it'll always have some common themes like embarrassment or excitement. We realized this as a group when we sat down and started exchanging stories. Immediately after hearing about how funny a parade of cows could have been, or how embarrassing a smile in the middle of a Taekwondo contest had to be, we all realized that not only could we relate to each other in such a meaningful way, but all the stories seemed to be really funny or really entertaining. So, enjoy.
Hi, my name is Danny McGill. This is one of my crazy childhood stories. It's from when I was a kid. I was around 8 years old, I believe, at the time. I had my parents tell this story because I felt like I was too young at this point to really remember, all the details and stuff like that. So, this story takes place around 2003 in my town of Warwick. This is where I currently live, and it's a surprising and crazy story, and I hope you enjoy.
So it is sometime circa 2003. We live in Warwick, New York, which is right across from a lovely little farm on the top of a hill. So we have a clear vision to the annual fireworks that is held after the firemen's parade. So each summer on the last Friday in June, we'd all go out and sit on the lawn and wait for the fireworks to begin at about 10 o'clock. We had a clear view, no trees in the way, and we usually had a party, and this year was no exception. We had our oldest daughter's graduation party from 8th grade. So we had a ton of people over, and I'm going to let my husband take you the rest of the way through this little event.
Yes, a police officer's motorcycle I noticed across the street by the farm, and really didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, out from the farm and onto the road started running about 15 cows. Now they weigh, I think, about 1,200 pounds each. So as they came out onto the road, they were actually running past where all our friends and neighbors were sitting on our lawn. Luckily, there was a gentleman by the name of Jan who was down below and was able to keep him in the road so they didn't stampede any of the small kids on the lawn. Also, an older boy had seen this and run down to the lower portion of the lawn and scooped up a little kid who was very close to getting crushed and run over by one of these 1,200-pound beef cows. The motorcycle policeman wound up chasing the cows into the village, as did the farmer and his ranch hands. They all jumped into little SUVs and shot down, chasing these cows into the village, and eventually they wound up bringing them all back to the farm. But the farmer told me that to this day he's missing one beef cow. He swears that somebody took it and got it down the basement or wherever and butchered him. Because I think they cost about $5,000 each. So luckily nobody was hurt. We had people laughing, but we also had people crying during the event. My wife's sister from the city was crying during this escapade in fear of these big animals crushing one of her kids. So, and then the rest of the night went smoothly. Okay, take care. Bye.
Everybody has their own favorite activities growing up. For me, my two favorite activities are hockey and jiu-jitsu. So in every one of his games, he just living, breathing hockey. So anytime I think about my childhood, I'm always associating it with hockey. One of the best things I remember from my entire childhood was playing hockey with my dad. Every summer, we would make a trip all the way up to Guelph, Canada to play in the Can-Am Hockey League. This was a camp as much as it was a month-long hockey tournament. In my most eventful summer there, I not only got my first stitches, but I also started the biggest hockey fight I've ever seen, all within the same week. That particular week, it was raining, and me being 11 or 12 at the time, I must have only weighed 120 pounds tops. Basically as much of all my hockey gear put together. Walking in all the rain and with all my gear was tough enough, but this time I had to walk up the stairs, and it was extra slippery. I slip, fall, crack my head right on the concrete stairs. I was the last person around, so the adults were all the way up ahead of us. I start tearing apart my bag, trying to find some type of towel to stop all the bleeding. Eventually, after about 30 seconds, I find a towel. I'm starting to apply pressure, and the adults finally find me. They run over, call 911, get the ambulance over as soon as possible. Instead of putting me inside the ambulance and driving to a hospital, they take me all the way to the back of the ice rink and lay me down on the trainer's table. Looking at my forehead, it's obvious that I need some type of a stitch. About 30 minutes later, I was all good to go. About a week later, we were playing a big game while all of our parents and crowd were all perched above at the bar and lounge, above the ice rink. The ice rink was set up so that the third or fourth floor was high above the rink and everyone could see perfectly from down below. What makes that good for this story was that the parents were so far away but had such a perfect view of all the action. Everything in the game was going perfectly fine until towards the end. Their player shot the puck, missed, our goalie grabbed it, and their player immediately skated towards our goalie and hit him. Out of the corner of my eye, I see this, and I get immediately pissed. Get over as fast as I can, I grab the kid, and immediately as soon as I hit him, his teammate hits me. After that, my teammate hit the teammate who hit me, and my goalie hit the kid who initially hit him. After about 10 seconds, this fight turned into a complete full ice brawl. My team cleared the bench entirely, their team cleared the whole bench, and we had about 30 kids on the ice, 11, 12 years old, beating the crap out of each other. The kid who started the whole fight, the kid who hit my goalie, eventually sees me in the crowd, skates towards me, throws his stick directly at my helmet. Next thing you know, he's taking off his gloves, throwing his gloves at me, grabbing whatever he can around the ice, picking it up, and trying to throw it at me while I'm chasing him. Eventually I get to the kid, but at that time I had at least 3 kids grabbing onto my jersey, my socks, my legs, being dragged as I ferociously skated after this kid. I'm finally stopped when there's about 8 kids holding on to me, grabbing my jersey in one way, shape, or form. At this point, I had completely forgotten about the game. I had completely forgotten about our parents being all the way up above us, and I also completely forgot about them watching all this go down. Looking back at it, I could only imagine how terrified or riled up those parents must have been watching their kids get into a huge hockey brawl. My dad told me when he was watching it all go down, at the very end of it, last thing he saw was me skating down the ice, dragging about 3 or 4 kids behind me as I chased down this kid. It's definitely fair to say I've never been in any type of fight or altercation just like that, and probably never will be. It was a one-of-a-time week and a one-of-a-time experience in Can-Am. especially with my dad.
Hey guys, my name is Emma, and I'm also here to tell you my story. When we first picked out our topic as a group, our theme was, what's a story your parents like to tell people that make you go like, ugh, no, not again? And the first thing that came to my mind was my first trip to Disney World when I was 4 years old.
I know you, I walked with you once upon a dream.
October 2001. When I was 4 years old, I got to experience every kid's childhood dream, going to Disney World. My dad pretty much recorded the entire trip on his video camera, so I still have a pretty vivid memory of the trip. My parents went into my brother's room and then headed for mine. I woke up to the sound of my mother's voice. She goes, Emma. I groan. She continues, Emma, get up. We're going somewhere special. I was half asleep and couldn't care less about what they were saying because it was still dark out. I like my sleep. Like my dad had some night vision going on the camera. I don't know what it was. But anyways, I moaned and I replied, no, leave me alone. And my dad said, well, I guess we're just going to have to go to Disney without you. It took me a second to realize that my dad had uttered the words Disney. I jumped out of bed and I said, I'm ready. My parents packed my bags already and I just packed my toys. And before we headed out, my brother handed me his Game Boy Color in its case with some games. My face lit up and he goes, Mom told me to give this to you. I got a Game Boy Advance. So it wasn't as sentimental as I thought it was, but thanks anyways, Kyle. Now I had something to do on the plane. A man pulled up into the driveway with a huge van. Inside the van was my aunt and my grandparents. Woohoo! Family vacation. My grandma even had a Minnie Mouse stuffed animal for me in the van. What a morning I was having. We got to the airport and it was kind of empty. People around this time were too scared to fly. We went on this trip a month after the tragedy of 9/11. That didn't stop my family from wanting to go to the happiest place on earth. We hopped on the plane and 3 hours later we landed in Orlando. This is the very beginning of my family's comedic trip to Disney. Let's start off with how my supposedly fearless brother was terrified of all of the rides around him. Everything we passed, he'd yell, I'm not going on that. But then there was little old me who wanted to go on everything. But being the tiny peanut that I wasn't tall enough to go on any of the cool big kid rides. My parents and my aunt went on Space Mountain and I was livid. I couldn't believe they'd go without me. I had no other option other than to sit and wait for them or find a non-thrilling kids ride. There were plenty of those, of course. One morning, we arrived at Magic Kingdom super early. God knows why. We walked around for a bit till I came to a halt. Before my eyes was a giant, bright Minnie Mouse roller coaster. It looked huge and exciting, so of course I ran to it. The line was completely empty, so without calling back to my parents, I ran up the ramp. Of course they weren't too thrilled about that. But the rest of the family joined me, including my chicken brother. The guy on the ride brought me over to one of the last few rows, and I said, oh no, I sit in the front. I was a very rebellious kid. What can I say? We went on the roller coaster so many times, because no one was lined up for it, so why not? Round and round we went. After about 5 minutes, you could hear my brother go, get me off of here, I think I'm going to be sick, in the background of my dad's videotape. We got off the ride as my brother was demanding it, and then he proceeded to run away and puke his brains out. Oops. The rest of the day was fun, until a bird pooped on my aunt's head. But my family says, if a bird poops on your head, it means someone who loves you is watching you. So thanks on shitting on Aunt Missy's head. Thank you, Aunt Heidi. Some other parts of the trip are kind of a blur, except for 2 incidents. The first one was at Animal Kingdom. We were talking to all of the characters and getting their signatures. We eventually stumbled upon Mushu from Mulan, who happens to be one of my favorites. We stopped and I played and I joked around with him for a few minutes. I kept poking him, and he kept pretending to fall over. And then I climbed back into my stroller, and he grabbed onto it and started jogging away from the rest of my family. Instead of seeing if I was about to get kidnapped, my mom said, "No worries, he'll get rid of her in 30 seconds." Which he technically did do, considering he was just joking and brought me right back. Lastly, the thing that probably embarrasses me the most about this trip was one of the nights the adults decided they wanted to go out, and they stuck my brother and I in some kind of play place / daycare that was part of the resort we were staying in. There was one girl who would not leave me alone the entire time, and she kept chasing me around the place and constantly wanted to be in control of the game I was playing. I hate people that do that, so I kept yelling at her to please get away from me, and she wouldn't listen. I got so angry that I got my stomach into a twist. I darted for the bathroom as my parents walked in to pick us up. I reached the bathroom and I was about to pull my pants down, and then boom. It was too late. I ended up pooping my pants. I was so embarrassed I sat in the bathroom until my parents found me on the toilet crying. They found me some clean clothes, and then it was time to head back to our room. And well, that's the end of that story. And that's all, folks. Those were the highlights, but also embarrassing moments of my trip to Disney World.
Hi, my name is Chelsea, and I'm going to be telling you a childhood story. I feel like we all have that one story that we can't ever escape. It's like a family favorite. Everyone loves to tell it around the holidays. It always gets the most laughs, but it's at your own expense, and it's kind of like, can we stop telling that story? I can say my mom even tells this story when she meets someone new on the grocery store line, So basically, me and my brother growing up, we did a lot of different active things like cheerleading, gymnastics, but what we both did that was in common was Taekwondo. And I mean, I only got into it because of how into it my brother was, because we would compete everywhere. Like, we would go to Las Vegas for nationals, Orlando, Florida for worlds. So it was just just a big part of my childhood. And the only reason why I even got into it was because my brother had taken it so seriously. And that's even why we started competing, because he wanted to. And I was always so bored at his competitions that one day my parents were like, well, you could either watch with us or we can get you to start competing too. And I was like, honestly, that sounds fun. So I got into it, and honestly, it was great. I did it for years. But my brother was so into it that he was competing at like such high ranks. Like, I know at one point I was in the top 9 in the world for weapons, but I don't even remember what my brother was, but it was way beyond that in more than just weapons, like forms, sparring. I mean, he was really good. So he was basically a role model. And I mean, growing up all the time, whenever I was learning a new form or anything, whenever I'd get to a new belt, he was someone that you could go to and ask about, oh, how do I do this? Or can you help me? I can't remember this. So he was just a big role model for that. So I just remember, and my parents never freaking let me forget this. It's crazy. But I had to have been about 6, maybe 7, no older than 8. It's within those 3 years. But the thing is, I was always so small that whatever age it was, I looked even tinier. And it was Worlds. It was definitely Worlds. So we were in Florida, and I was practicing my forms right after my brother had competed. So I did still end up watching him compete, but it was okay because I was mentally preparing myself for my own competition. So I'm practicing my forms, and my brother comes over to offer his words of wisdom. And I mean, like, not to brag about the school that we had learned from, but we were pretty sharp, so the stakes were pretty high if you were coming from the school that we went to. So he comes over, and I do my form for him a couple times, and he's giving me a couple pointers, and things are going great, like this is looking good. And he goes, you know what you should do? And me being like, he's great at this. They're like, of course I should be taking his advice. I'm like, what? And he goes, you should make a really mean and intimidating mad face the whole time that you're doing your form. Because when you do the face, you get the mindset, and when you have the mindset, your moves just come out more sharp. And I was like, okay, I guess I could try that. And so we practiced a couple times, but it was so funny because just the mean face, it's so not me. So, I had gotten through the form once or twice doing it because I was trying to pull it together for him because he was really helping. And so now it comes to the time where it's for me to compete, run up there. And again, I'm 6, 7, or 8, but absolutely tiny. I had a growth deficiency, so I looked younger than whatever I actually was. And I get up there, and one of the judges is actually one of the instructors from my school because he was also competing competitively. And I get up there, and not only is he a teacher for my school, but he's specifically my teacher. He teaches my class. And I get up there and I get into stance with a mean face and immediately burst out laughing. My whole entire body rejected this mean face. And there was nothing else to do but to keep going. So now I keep trying to go back to the mean face. I keep trying to go back to being intimidating because I'm competing, this is supposed to be serious. And I keep dying laughing. So I'm doing my form, but I'm giggling the entire time. And I guess if I were my family, I wouldn't let me forget it either, because it is pretty funny. But I will say that I ended up with the Spirit Award that day. So there's that.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's your girl, Danny B, aka Danielle Bagley, and I'm going to tell y'all a little story about my favorite holiday growing up as a kid. Remember when? My parents have always made sure that I got the very best of the best when it came to my education, social life, materialism, and extracurricular activities. In 2001, my family and I lived in Houston, Texas. The house that I lived in was designed with 2 levels, 4 bedrooms, a playroom, and a pool. Yeah, I know, that was my favorite part. At the time, my father owned a 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee, and my mom owned a 2001 green Volvo. However, the cool part about the house was that it was filled up from head to toe with electronics. My favorite thing was the sound system in the television set. It was a 1990 Sony sound-based system that was attached with a Sony television set that was 85 inches. That was a lot for back in the day. That's practically one of those flat screen TVs that are 85 inches now. Imagine that. My favorite holiday while living in Houston was Christmas. My mother would always make sure that the house literally looked like a freaking winter wonderland. She would set up the house with animatronics that consisted of Looney Tunes, Disney characters, even a talking Christmas tree that would sing, "Rockin' around the Christmas tree, it's a special time of year." Imagine that. My parents would always throw this big Christmas Eve party every year since we lived in Houston. And there would be multiple tables of food and anything that you could think of. They'd go all out. Except this year was very interesting. My Uncle John decided to deep fry the holiday turkey. Again, I know, deep fry a turkey. How the hell you gonna do that? I guess this is a big thing that they do in Texas. It's either go big or go home, right? My mother tells me to go stand outside with my cousins to watch my father and uncle make the turkey. I guess for some odd reason she felt that something bad may happen. Who knows, right? So my uncle starts the fire on the fryer and my dad picks up the turkey. I asked my dad, "Do you know what you're doing?" He says, "Of course, Pooh, yeah, I know what I'm doing. You should know better. I've been frying stuff before you was even born." Yeah, okay, Daddy, I say. And Pooh's my nickname, like Winnie the Pooh, who eats honey. Yeah, go figure. As he emerges the turkey into the fryer, my uncle grabs the legs and helps my father out. I couldn't help but notice the turkey was dripping wet. And the last time I checked from watching Magic School Bus, you shouldn't mix 2 compounds together like that. Water and oil, well, you know what's gonna happen next, I guess. As they drop the turkey into the fire, on the fryer, outside on the porch next to the pool, no less, everything burst into flames. Literally. My uncle catches on fire and jumps into the pool, and then my father goes into the house to get loud, and I'm screaming from the top of my lungs, "Oh my God, somebody call 911, the turkey blew up." Ah! The fire department came and the paramedics made sure that everything and everyone was okay. And my uncle and dad only suffered a few minor burns. However, jumping into the pool I didn't think was a good idea because of chlorine. It's crazy how my life works. The next morning was Christmas Day, and I was beyond excited. I look over my banister to see that there's a bunch of toys waiting for me. I run downstairs and immediately look at my parents like, "Are these all for me?" They say, "Yeah, Santa dropped them off." So I say, wow, what could I possibly get this Christmas? I got 2 Easy Bake Ovens, which my grandparents got me one, and my parents got me one. I guess they figured, like, if one person couldn't get it, the other person could. And I got a Nintendo 64 Gold Edition with over, 50 games, a brand new bike, and a Barbie beach house that included a Destiny's Child set of dolls made by Mattel. Yeah, Beyonce, Kelly, and Michelle. The best type of dolls I could ever have. And I got a bunch of Disney movies on VHS. Yeah, I said VHS. And I got a tape rewinder the same year, so it was lit. My very own karaoke machine. And I got a Destiny's Child CD. And I was singing Independent Women all day long. And I got a keyboard, tap shoes, and a Game Boy Color. My Christmas was pretty set. However, when I think about it, my Christmas was pretty good. Despite the fact that a turkey blew up and my uncle got a few minor burns and that, my dad thought it'd be okay to fry a wet turkey that wasn't probably even done defrosting. But it was a good Christmas though. Yeah, that's my childhood memory. I can't believe all of that stuff that happened.
I'd like to conclude by saying thank you to our viewers that tune in for our podcast every week. It makes it worthwhile what we're doing. And I appreciate every one of you who took the time to listen to our stories. I felt we had a good variety of stories this week, from the cows stampeding down the street to the Disney World story, the Taekwondo competition, all the way to the crazy hockey fight. I hope you found them interesting, each in their own right. We felt the theme of childhood stories connected them all together perfectly. Our stories shed light on the different upbringings everyone goes through in the different households we were raised in, and all the goofy, crazy stories that come about from living in these households. So again, I'd just like to say thank you, and tune in next week when we tell some more crazy childhood stories.